This week on Today's Homeowner, we're turning something old into something new as we explore some great ideas to help you turn trash into treasure. This week, it's all about trash to treasure, where you're taking some of that old stuff you might have around your home and turning it into something that's functional, or you might use that as an opportunity to create something that's uniquely your own. Well, if you don't have any of that stuff laying around your home, you can certainly find it at a place like this. This is a habitat restore where you have the opportunity as a contractor or a homeowner to donate different materials that might be coming out of your house, like the cabinets that have been removed from your kitchen renovation, or maybe some old materials or new materials that are just overstocked. All of this can be donated to Habitat for Humanity. They're able to resell it at a very reasonable price, allowing them money to continue their great work across the country building houses. Now, when you get into a place like this, you can also find some things like this, furniture that would work perfect in your home with just a little TLC. In most cases, a furniture find will require refinishing. The chemical stripper is the quickest way to start removing the old finish. The best tip here is to carefully follow the directions for the product you choose. If they say leave it on there for 10 minutes, then leave it on there for 10 minutes before you begin scraping. A putty knife with rounded edges is great for this kind of job because it won't gouge the wood. You can remove the stripper residue with water or mineral spirits, depending on the type of stripper that you've used. Begin sanding with a more coarse grit of paper, then work up to a finer grit. The stripper, scraping, and solvent will raise the grain of the wood, so you'll have to smooth it right back out. It's messy, but if you apply the stain with a rag, you'll have a lot more control. Then, when the stain is dry, you're ready for several coats of finish sealer to protect the piece. Not all of the items that are in a restore or in a salvage yard are in their finished state, like the cabinets and the furniture that we looked at earlier. Some things are just building materials, and some look a little better than others. Looks like this stack of 2x4s was left out on a job site out in the weather a little bit too long and kind of weathered them a bit, but still, they didn't end up in the dumpster, going to the landfill. They're going to be able to be reused by someone on a future project. Now, here's another situation where someone has kept a lot of things out of the landfill. We met sawmill owner Roy Hyde several months ago, and we were working on a show about a new home where some of Roy's custom milling work was being used. Roy's an interesting character, but what we also discovered was that the source of lumber for his little sawmill also has a pretty interesting twist too. It seems that all of the tree services in this community know Roy and his love for wood, so when they have to take down a few trees, rather than hauling the wood to the landfill, they bring it to the Hyde sawmill. It's cheaper for them, and it provides Roy with an endless supply of trees to be milled into all kinds of lumber.
This is some old pecan, and it had to be removed because they were making an addition to their house and they couldn't do it without taking the tree out. And this is live oak with the same sort of thing. This particular one went down in a storm.
Roy spends a lot of his time milling down trees into lumber that other people will use in their projects. But as you can see, he's a pretty hands-on individual, so he also uses this wood for his own unique creations.
See, for instance, this is a piece of pecan here, and this is going to be a friend of mine, a chef friend of mine. This is going to be his cutting board.
His cutting board.
Because of his no-nonsense approach to life and his love for wood, most of Roy's work has a pretty rustic flair. He puts his own unique spin on everything, from furniture to larger architectural pieces. But the thing you've got to just love about this guy is that he doesn't take himself too seriously.
We are professional wood movers. And what it boils down to is we pick up a log, we move it up here. We cut it up, we move it over here. We sweep it off, we put it in there, then we take it out of there.
Those are some very unique things that Roy makes with all of that lumber that he mills. And you know, when you have a very inexpensive material, it's very easy to be a little more liberated in some of the things you may want to try around your house. Well, we're taking this $10 door, and a little bit later in the show, Alan and I are going to turn this into something completely different that makes it a very functional part of the home. We'll be catching up on that in just a little bit, but right now, you catch up with Joe Truini on this week's Simple Solution with a very common repair to a wooden chair.
Sometimes the smallest problems we face around the house are also the most annoying, and here's a good example of one: the wobbly chair. Now, to fix it, the first thing you need to know is don't start cutting legs that you think are long, because you'll wind up ruining the chair. The trick is to find the leg that's short. In this case, by putting it on a flat surface and wobbling it, just notice that this is the leg that's short. So we're going to fix that problem by taking a wood shim and sliding it under as far as we need to until the chair's not wobbling anymore. There you go. Now we're going to mark it with a pencil right where the chair leg sits on the shim and cut out that disc with a hole saw. Then pull out the disc as a hole so it's perfect, fits right underneath there. And we're going to put a screw through that in a second, but there you go. You notice that? It takes the wobble right out. Now, we're not going to just glue it on though, because if you take this little wood disc and just glue it there, it's going to pop off as you're sliding the chair back and forth across the floor. So we're going to hold it on with a furniture glide. You can get it at any hardware store or home center. We're just going to put that right on there. And of course, we're going to need to put one on every leg, otherwise you'll still have a wobble. There you go. Now with the shim and the glide under the short leg, you put it down, and there you go, rock solid.
Hey, you got the door.
Yeah, only $10 too.
That'll work great. $10? You're kidding me, man. Hey, why did I have to get these buckets?
I'll have to share that with you in just a minute. You know, the whole approach to trash to treasures is to take something you would ordinarily throw away, turn it into something that's really functional. You might remember we used an old antifreeze jug a while back, and we cut it a certain way to create this nice little scoop to keep those gutters clean around your home.
Now, another simple thing to do is take an old oil bottle like this, cut off the bottom, and what you're going to wind up with is a makeshift funnel. And it's perfect because the next bottle fits right inside. Just don't forget to take the cap off.
Now, these ideas may be a little boring, kind of like Alan, but you can take materials and have a lot of fun with it. And recently, our director's son, Josh, dropped by the shop and showed Joe Truini a nice little project that was a lot of fun. Everything needed for Josh's creation is scrap or leftover material, so this certainly qualifies it as a trash to treasure project.
Well, me and my dad, we made this punching bag, and I was thinking maybe we could recreate this, show everybody how to do it. First, what we're going to do is we're going to cut out a foot out of this plywood.
Okay,
right here.
Right?
Yep.
This is just to form a base so the foam doesn't fall off, right?
Yep. Now we're going to roll it up in our carpet padding.
All right, so we've got to cut that, slice that to size first, right? Tape it, that's just to get it started, I guess. All right. Now we just roll it up.
Now you just keep rolling.
Whoa, look at that. Worked out perfectly. There's nothing you can't build with a little duct tape, right?
Yep.
All right. So, now
we're going to wrap the entire thing with duct tape.
Is that all right? Do you need to cover that up, or is that all right?
That's good.
Is that all right? All right, Josh. That's pretty cool.
So all you really need is PVC,
right.
carpet padding, and duct tape, and you got yourself a heavy bag.
Good job.
That was a pretty fun project. Maybe Josh will take out all of his frustrations on the punching bag instead of on his brother.
Now, I did like the project, but I'm a lot more curious about this one. Why did I have to get all these buckets?
Well, you know, there's so many different uses for 5-gallon buckets around the house, and we've actually shown a few of those uses on the shows in the past. But I've got an idea of a solution to a storage problem a lot of homeowners have.
Now, just so you don't think I ran around different job sites stealing buckets, I do know a painter, asked him to save some for me, but I still had to clean them all out. Now, it brings up a good point. If you want to collect buckets like this, don't go for the ones with roofing cement or glue in them. You'll never get them clean.
Well, you did do a pretty good job getting these nice and clean. But my idea is actually to create a mudroom caddy where you come into your mudroom or into your entryway of your home, maybe the back door near the kitchen or in the garage, and you're able to use this for a lot of those things that get dropped off all over the floor. First thing we have to do is figure out how we can cut this little rim off in order to get started on it. I'm thinking the solution may be using a jigsaw. The lip of the bucket should act as kind of a fence to keep the cut straight all the way around the bucket, but seems to be a little bit easier to hold the saw still and let Alan rotate the bucket into it. Then we sand off the rough edges before we begin laying out our design, which in this case will be a pyramid shape. Because these buckets are tapered, not straight cylinders, this is where it gets a little tricky. There are going to be several different angles working, so we're experimenting and test fitting as we go along. Now, after some trial and error, we arrive at the angle that seems to work just right. This framework will be nailed together, and then we'll begin creating a support for the back side of the bucket, a simple triangle made from scrap plywood. After all the wood parts are sanded, primed, and painted, the final assembly can begin with screwing the buckets to the plywood in the proper arrangement. These bulldog clamps really help to keep everything straight. Then we can set the buckets inside the frame and begin attaching the buckets with small screws. So what do you think? Pretty simple, huh?
Yeah, you know, you have a pretty good idea every now and again. This actually is a really good idea. We've cut the tops off so it doesn't intrude too much into the room, right up against the door, perfect for the kids to put the muddy shoes, maybe even some outdoor toys.
Yeah, and you could make it as big or as little as you want. We've used 6 buckets, but you could use 3, 5, or a whole stack of them. Now, you notice when we were building this, we had to do a little sanding. Well, this week, Jody has a best new product that'll make sanding a little easier.
You know, the first time that I used this little zip sander, I liked it because of this neat foam grip. If you've ever had to use sanding blocks before, you can relate. This is much easier on the knuckles. This one has a nice, soft, but firm handle, which makes it more comfortable than a sanding block. Actually, the entire zip sander is made with the same high-density foam. That feature, in addition to the hexagon shape with 2 pointed edges and 4 curves, makes it flexible enough to fit into most grooves, curves, and edges. A huge help when sanding, trim, and molding. It also comes with an assortment of color-coded sanding sheets from 80 to 220 grit. Each one attaches easily with the hook and loop grip, and you're ready to go to work. The number and color-coded sandpaper ID system is especially great because it makes it easy for anyone to find the right sanding paper grit for every step of the project. This is a great tool for tons of projects, from removing paint and refinishing furniture to fine woodworking. And for about $10, you get more than your money's worth.
Here we go. Hey, I hope you're enjoying our Trash to Treasures projects, and we have another one here where we're taking the door that we picked up at the Habitat for Humanity Restore and about to turn it into something that almost any household could use.
But you can do so much with a door. I've seen bed headboards made from a door, hinged 2 or 3 together for a decorative room divider. The Habitat store where this came from actually has a contest going on right now where they're encouraging people to purchase their doors, turn them into beautiful pieces of art. Some really great entries for that.
Now, what we're planning on doing, though, is turning this into a computer desk. The first step is removing some of the stuff that made it a door, like the old hinges. These things are ancient and caked with all kinds of layers of paint, so Alan has to work at them a bit. And then there's the matter of all the holes left behind by the missing hardware. I'm filling the biggest part of the void with wood before I start mixing up some auto body filler to finish patching the holes. This stuff is often referred to by the trade name Bondo, and it'll dry to an extremely hard finish really fast, so it's perfect for this kind of project. But you don't want to leave too much excess because you'll end up having to sand it all off once it's dry. Because it shrinks some as it dries, it often takes 2 or more coats to get the surface nice and level. While I'm working on this, Alan gets busy cutting down the material for the desktop and the shelves. When all of the pieces are cut to size, he runs them through a router to give the edges a nice little cove treatment. Then there's lots and lots of sanding to be done. Everywhere I've used Bondo, the surface has to be sanded down until the patch material is flush with the rest of the door surface. Alan is sanding down all of the new wood to remove any of the marks and splinters left behind by the table saw or the router. Because this door is so old, there's quite a bit of flaking paint that has to be scraped off, and of course, that means more sanding. We're ready to assemble the shelves and the desktop, and we're using some of the pre-made corbels that Alan found for us to support these horizontal surfaces. Setting them out on the door to put them together really helps to ensure that the layout is just right. To support the door itself, Alan is making a pair of legs from an old piece of 2x6. They'll extend about a foot out on either side of the door with the ends kind of rounded over to smooth out the look a little bit. Speaking of that, I hope we're almost through with the sanding. Well, Alan, I don't care how long I do this kind of thing, I still just can't stand sanding. But these little sanding gadgets make it a little bit easier.
It looks really good. And you know, it's an old door. Personally, I like leaving some of the flaws in it. It just gives it character.
Now at this point, we can install our desktop and the two shelves that Alan put together, but anytime you're installing this, whether you're doing it on a door like we're doing it or on a wall in your house, you want to make sure it stays there. So we'll be putting some wood glue on this, nailing it from this side, then turning the door over and putting in a few screws. Glue tends to be less effective on painted surfaces than bare wood, but if you've sanded the paint as well as we have here, it will add a bit of valuable insurance to the joint. Since we planned the layout of the corbels earlier, all we have to do now is line up the edges of the desktop with the edges of the door and we're good to go. A nail gun makes this kind of assembly quick and easy, but because the nails are a fairly thin gauge metal, the screws we'll add later will still be very important. The shelves at the top work much the same way, but we have to be a little more careful with our layout since we don't have a rail in the door to line them up on. To add the screws, we're flipping the door over on the sawhorses and pre-drilling all of the spots we need. Pre-drilling is often done to prevent splitting, but that isn't a concern here. This door is just ancient and the wood is incredibly hard. Alan is following up with a countersink bit so the screw heads will be below the surface of the door and then we can hide them with a little more Bondo. Now while we're working on this side, we add a wooden coat rack to the door to give it a little more functionality. Now we're ready for the legs. While I hold the door plumb, Alan tacks the legs on with a nail gun before we drive in long screws to hold everything firmly together. Finally, we're ready for a coat of primer and 2 coats of paint before putting this old door to a new use. All right, Alan, this shouldn't take much installation at all, huh?
Well, I think this is going to be as simple as you find the spot and set it in place.
Well, that's a pretty good spot because, you know, in a living room like this, people really don't tend to use it as much as they do other rooms in their house. And to have this right in the corner, laptop, and maybe a few pictures, and then the coat rack right on the back when your guests come in the front door.
You know, this really is a great reuse for an old door. Here's another great reusing thought in today's Thinking Green.
Did you know that in America, paper towels account for 3,000 tons of waste every day? But most recycling centers won't accept used paper towels, so they still end up in the landfill. If you want to do your part to cut down on the 1 billion tons of waste every year, then switch to sponges for your daily cleanup. A single sponge can last up to the equivalent of 17 rolls of paper towels. Unfortunately, along with all those kitchen spills you may clean up, sponges also pick up a lot of bacteria. So here's an easy way to completely sterilize your sponges. First, rinse your dirty sponge in clean water, then make sure it's still wet. Place it in your microwave on the highest setting for about 2 minutes. Once it has cooled, you have a sterile sponge for cleaning, and besides saving room in the landfills, you'll be saving some pocket change. Well, Alan, we really didn't spend a lot of money on this thing, did we?
No, you spent $10 for the door. I paid about $4 for each corbel. There's 6 of those. So $24, $34, about $10 worth of paint. Less than $50.
That's pretty good for a piece of, say, furniture that you can use in a lot of different areas of the house. And one thing to think about, everything here could have ended up in the landfill other than the corbels that we purchased, so you really can turn trash into treasures. If it's new and cool for the kitchen or bath, you'll find it right here next week.